Hi there, my name is Gillian Rouge. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to be making a beautiful fun fold card with this Grassy Grove bundle that is in the January to June mini catalogue. And let me show you the card right away. This is the card. So I had card classes at my house last weekend, and this was one of the cards that we made, and I promised I would do a video to show you how to make it. So here's the front, which is quite ordinary, but then when you open up, you have this lovely scene inside. Now the designer series paper in the back is from the New Horizons designer series paper stack. So I'll show you those too. But anyway, without further ado, let's get started on the card. So you'll need, to get started, you will need a top folding card base. I am using Evening Evergreen. Whoops. So it's going to be 11 inches by 4 1/4 inches, scored at 5 1/2. So just a regular card base. And then you will need a piece of basic white, which is also 11 inches by 4 1/8. So just a little bit narrower. And we need to do some scoring. So I'll bring in my trimmer. So we're going to score at the halfway mark, just like a regular card base. So at 5 1/2, and then we're going to find the halfway mark on each side. So half of 5 1/2 is 2 3/4. So we'll score at 2 3/4 from each end. It would be 8 1/4 if you had your arm extended here. It would be 2 3/4, 5 1/2, 8 1/4. But I'm just kind of being lazy and flipping my cardstock around. Now, I am going to trim a little bit off each end, and you could do this ahead of time, but it makes the measurements, the scoring measurements, a bit tricky. So I'm just going to trim off about kind of between an 1/8 and a 1/16, just a little bit past that dark grey line, but not quite up to the 1/8 of an inch mark. So just a little sliver like that. Flip it around and do the same this end. Okay, then I can put my scoring board away for now. My trimmer, not my scoring board, my trimmer. Okay, so now we're going to do some folding. We want the middle score line, we want a mountain fold for that. So I'll do that. And then we want valley folds on the 2 outside pieces. And you can just fold them fairly lightly at the moment, and we'll reinforce them in a little bit. So you're going to have like a letter M, okay? Then we'll die cut the scene on the inside. So for the dies, we have this big die here that will cut out this pretty scene on the inside. So I'll just center that kind of in the middle here, and you can just eyeball it, doesn't have to be perfect. And I'll just take a little piece of tape and low tack tape and secure it. Just try and get this line along the bottom somewhat straight. And then I'm going to run that through my die cut machine, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's my die cut. So now to achieve that lovely effect in the middle, I'm going to do some sponging and some stamping. So normally I would do this on a piece of grid paper, but I thought it might be easier for the video if I used a piece of black cardstock. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to use some post-it notes. Now, if you don't have big post-it notes like this, you could use some masking tape, or you could just use some copy paper with some removable adhesive on the back, whatever you have that's nice and thin. But I do recommend that you cover up the entire sides so that you don't get any inky fingers on your cardstock. Ask me how I know that. So I'll just line this up right up against the score line, like that. And I'm kind of using the post-it note to secure the card to the black cardstock also, so it'll hold it still while I'm sponging. Make sure I got all the little pieces out. All right, and then I'll do the same on this side, and I want my piece fairly flat. Right, now I'm going to grab my soft succulent ink and a blending brush. And I always use I keep one blending brush per color family. So this is my green, and I know I used soft succulent on here last, so I don't need to worry about transferring any color that I don't want. But it's a good idea to rub the blending brush off on some scrap paper just to make sure that you don't have a color that you don't want. So I'm just going to ink up my blending brush, and then I'm just going to work all the way around, building up color on here. And I'm kind of staying away from the tree trunks. I'm going to leave those white or pretty white. You can sponge those with crumb cakes. Some of the ladies at my class did them in crumb cake. I kind of like them just left white, but obviously when you make your card, it's up to you. So you're just going to keep going until you get the level of ink that you like. I'm just going to use my post-it notes coming up a little bit. I'm going to use a little bit of tape just to hold this down a bit better. All right, I think that's good. Maybe a little bit more right here. And we can always come back in after our stamping and do a little bit more if I decide it's not dark enough. And don't worry if you get any harsh marks, don't worry about that, because that's not going to show once we get all the stamping done. So now I'm going to come in with my Evening Evergreen ink and one of the stamps from the stamp set. It's this one with the 3 trees. And I'm going to use this to kind of stamp around and fill in the trees. Now, I saw another demonstrator do this. This wasn't my idea, and I don't remember her name, but if I can find it, I will give her credit underneath the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of ink up where I just get the trees and not too much of the trunk. So I'm kind of using the edge of the ink pad, and I'm just going to go around and fill in, and kind of moving my stamp around a little bit. And you can go back in and do, you know, second and third time. But each time, like I say, I'm kind of just inking up along the edge of the ink pad. I'm going to go all the way down the side too. So just keep working round. You can also, I can get some of this area kind of in the middle too. And just kind of move the trees around a little bit so that they're not all at the same angle. I'll come down this side. Got an area here I need to fill in. We're getting there. Do a little bit more down here. I am going to use another big stamp along the bottom, so I don't need to do the bottom. Do right there. And you can just kind of go fill in wherever you think needs a bit more. Maybe along the top here a little bit. I don't want to fill it in completely. I want some kind of lighter areas. but that looks pretty good, I think. All right, and then I'm going to use the very large stamp, this one, and I'll ink that up and I'll use that along the bottom. So I'm going to do it in the middle, and then I will need to ink up just a little bit more, and the other end a little bit more. And there we go. Just come a little bit more there. All right, I think that looks good. Like I say, if you want to do the tree trunks a different color, you definitely could. Crumb cake would be a good color, I think. Shouldn't be too dark, but I like them white, but that's completely up to you. All right, now it's time to do the big reveal. This is always the fun part. So very carefully, making sure not to get inky fingers on the white. Just peel your Post-it notes away. That looks lovely. The other thing I'm going to do is stamp the sentiment, the inside sentiment, and I'm using this stamp. It's from the Peaceful Moments stamp set, and this is carrying over into the new catalogue, and I'm so happy about this. It's been around for a little while, but I just love the sentiments in here. I love the font, and there's happy birthday, there's sympathy, there's thank you, there's congratulations, and there's sentiments that work on the inside of the card too. So I'm doing wishing you every happiness on the inside, and I'm going to use Memento black ink. So I'll just ink up my ink here and stamp that. Obviously you could do whatever sentiment you like. I just think this is a really special card, so I think it would be a good birthday card. Oops, very slightly crooked maybe, but it's okay. The person opening the card will be so amazed by the inside they won't notice the sentiment's crooked, right? Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to pick the background, although it looks kind of pretty on the black, doesn't it? But let me grab the Designer Series paper. So this is the New Horizons 6x6 Designer Series paper that's also in the mini catalogue. And there's all kinds of lovely scenes that you can use. And I pulled out a couple. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting off quite a bit of the top or bottom, but we're using almost the full width. So you can kind of play around and see how it would look. I think that would look really pretty with a little bit of the pink, don't you? So let's use this one, and I'll bring back in the trimmer, and this needs to be cut to 5.5 by 4 1/8, and I'll have all the dimensions underneath my video, but let's cut this down. So I just need to cut a 1/2 inch off one side, so I think I'll cut it off this side. This down a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of decide, I kind of want this area in the middle, I think, maybe with a little bit of the yellow. So I need it to be 4 1/8. So I think I'm going to cut, I'm going to leave a little bit of the blue there. And then I'm going to flip it around and see how I'm doing. 4 1/8. I think that will be good. So I'll kind of do it like this. And then obviously these scraps you could save for another project. Oh, and I do need to score this down the middle. That's the other thing too. So again, this is 5.5, so half would be 2 3/4, just like the card base. So we'll score that. All right. Okay, now I'm going to bring back in my card base and attach this. And so what we need to do is line up the score line on the Designer Series paper with the score line on the card base. And I'm going to use liquid glue here because I want to make sure that every square inch of this is stuck down to the card base, because when you fold it in half, close it. I don't want any kind of thing bubbling up or anything like that. So I'm going to be fairly generous with the glue. And I do like liquid glue for this part right here, just because I do want to get really good coverage. And I also want a little, you know, a couple of seconds to be able to line it up properly. So like I say, I'm going to try and line up the score line. And I'm trying to line it up kind of top to bottom also. And then once I'm happy with it, I can press down really, really well. Make sure that's stuck really well. And then I am going to do a little bit of stamping on here, and sometimes I do it before attaching it, but afterwards is fine too. So I'm going to do some little birds. Now these birds are from the On the Horizon stamp set, this one right here, it's the little birds, and I'm never quite sure which way up they should go. I guess it's this way. Okay, lining up the same direction as the stamp set. To me, they look kind of right both directions almost. I don't think anyone would notice. So we'll do some birds just about here. And then I'm going to do some of this stamp right here. And I'm going to do that in Evening Evergreen. You could do black also. Now, if I go off to the side here, it doesn't matter because these two areas are going to be covered up. So I'm not worried about if I stamp off to the side a little bit. So I'm going to go kind of in the middle. I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom. I'm just going to kind of go about here. And this part's optional. You don't have to do this. I think it just adds a little bit of extra interest to the background. You could do some taller trees, you know, whatever you like really. So I'm just going to stamp one more here. And like I say, don't worry about this because that's going to get covered up. And then maybe one more kind of like this. All right, so that looks pretty. I'm happy with that. All right, and then I am just going to fold this. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper and make sure this is really dry first, just to be on the safe side. And then I'm going to fold this to reinforce this score line, just to make sure that it's going to fold really well because it's got that extra thickness here. I'm going to grab my bone folder. And I'm just going to make sure that that all looks good and I'm not seeing anything bubbling up or anything at the top or the bottom. So that looks really good. I'll do it both sides. Okay, now I can bring back the die cut. And I'm going to attach this. But I also want to really reinforce these folds really well so that the card will close up somewhat easily. So I'm going to just really reinforce this and this and then this one. Because there's a lot of thicknesses here. I want to make sure that the card is going to close up. And then very carefully this middle one. That. Okay, now let's attach this in here. So I'm going to do one side at a time. I'm going to kind of lie it flat and see, make sure that it's all gonna line up okay. And so I want to, my goal is to line up this score line in the middle again. So I'm going to just put adhesive on one side, and again I'm going to use liquid glue so I have a little bit of time to line everything up. But you can use your Stampin' Seal too, whatever adhesive you like. And we'll do this side. Make sure it's the right way up. And again, I'm kind of make sure my fold, oops, it's kind of in the middle here. That looks good. So attach that down really well. And then we'll do the other end. And I want to make sure that when it closes, that it's not... Now, this little piece that's hanging out there, I can trim that off. That sometimes happens, that you get a little piece, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to trim that off in just a second. So we'll put glue on this side. And we'll glue this side down. And then the other thing I need to do on the inside before moving on to the front is to add my little deer. So I've got a couple of little black deer, so let me grab those. Okay, here's my mama deer and baby deer. These are standalone dies that come in the dies. This die here cuts out the deer stamp, but these one just cut the two cardstock deer. So I've got those. And so I'm going to position the mama deer. Let's not make sure I don't lose the little baby there. I'm going to position the mama kind of here. So I'm going to put a little touch of glue on the two tree trunks right there. So we'll just do a little tiny, you want to go very, you don't want very much here because you don't want the glue to ooze out and the trees to get stuck to the background. So just a little. And then we'll just set her. Now you could maybe do this before, might be easier actually to attach the deer before you attach the, attach this piece to the card base. So you could definitely do that. I kind of like to be able to position it though where I want. So there's mama. And then the baby, I'm going to put down here. Now you just need to be a little bit careful because you don't want the baby's nose to poke out. So make sure that you've got your, I don't know if you can see this here. You've got the score line right here. That's a bit difficult to see. You've got the score line right there. Make sure the little deer's nose is not coming over the score line. Otherwise it'll be peeking out when you close the card, which will look funny. So I'm just going to put a little tiny dab of glue on the baby's feet. And then attach the baby right here. Say, make sure here's all her nose. Whoops. And close it carefully. It's not hanging over the edge. There we go. And then I'm just going to leave this to dry. I'm not going to close it up because I don't want to risk this getting attached to the back. So I'm going to leave that to dry while I work on the front of the card. So I'll just put that to one side. And then for the card front, I've got two pieces of cardstock. I've got a matte layer in soft succulent. And this measures 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. And then this white piece, basic white, is 5 by 3 3/4. So let's do some stamping. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to stamp with, using this big stamp here. I'm going to ink it up with crumb cake. So I've got my crumb cake ink. And I say with these big stamps, it's often easier to turn them over and take the ink pad to the stamp so you can really see that you're getting everything inked up. Then I want, if I can bring back in my original card and show you, this is that stamp there, and you can see I've got the little greenery kind of growing out of it. So how I did that was I've got, whoops, my soft succulent and my evening evergreen markers. I'm going to take the soft succulent and using the brush tip end, and I'm just going to go over the areas where I think it would be kind of grassy. So I'm just going to, using kind of the side of the tip, I'm just going to go over. Now, if I'd inked up with a really dark color and not crumb cake, I would need to kind of wipe that off before doing this. But because it's crumb cake, it's fairly light, I can just go over the top with the soft succulent, and I think it'll be fine. We'll see. But yeah, if I'd inked up with soft suede or something, I would need to wipe that off before using my soft succulent, marker over the top. So that's the soft succulent, and then I'm going to grab my evening evergreen, and again the brush tip, and I'm just going to put some little dark accents in at the bottom. So I'm just kind of flicking, and then these smaller areas I'm just going to kind of bounce or thump, some people say thumping, bounce my pen just kind of along where the crumb cake and the soft succulent meet, just to give some a little added kind of interest. And this is purely optional. You don't have to do any of this. You could just stamp the whole thing in crumb cake, but I kind of like the effect that it gives. And then because the crumb cake ink may have dried and the soft succulent ink may have dried a little bit, we have to reactivate it with the huffing technique. So we're going to just huff on it, and that lovely hot breath will activate, and then we'll just stamp kind of towards the bottom. And there you can see now I've got some green areas instead of all just crumb cake. So pretty easy to do, but quite effective. Okay, then I need my evening evergreen and soft succulent. I'm going to do a couple more trees. So I've got the fir trees. I'm going to do those in all evening evergreen. We'll stamp those, and just about there. And then these ones that I used on the inside, I'm going to ink those up in soft succulent and stamp those. And if you notice, they kind of go up. They're kind of like they're growing up a slope, so they're designed to kind of work with this slope. I think the tree on the left is a little bit higher, so we can just get that about like that, I think. There we go. And I've got a scrap of soft succulent, and I will stamp and die cut some trees. Okay, so here's a piece of soft succulent, and if you still have your Stampin' Up! Embossing buddy, you can just wipe that over your cardstock. And then I've got some Versamark ink, so I will ink up my trees. Stamp them onto here. And then I've got some silver embossing powder. Okay, let me heat set these trees really quickly. There we go, it's looking lovely. So there's a die in the Grove dies that will cut those trees out. So I will go do that. And at the same time, I am going to cut out a little sentiment tag for the front. Now this die is from these dies, the Beautiful Shapes dies that are also in the mini catalogue, and there's a large one that's kind of similar too. And you'll see the way it cuts out is a little bit kind of rustic. I think it works well on the front of the card. So I'll be right back. I'm going to die cut these quickly. Okay, so here's my little tag, and you can see the way it die cuts. I think it's kind of like a little bit rustic looking. And then here's my trees. And I am using the Happy Birthday stamp from this stamp set, Days to Remember. This is in the annual catalogue. And because it is a photopolymer stamp, I was able to die cut this first. Usually I would, if it was a red rubber stamp, I would stamp first and then die cut. But I'm going to be able to see where to line up. So I'm going to stamp it in Evening Evergreen. Let's see if I can, just like that. You could heat emboss this too, that would be pretty. And then I'm going to put some twine on the back of this. So I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal and just put a little bit of Stampin' Seal on the back, like that. And then I'm going to use some of this elegant twine, and I'm using the silver. There's a gold also. I'm going to wrap this around my fingers just like 2 or 3 times, and then cut that off. And then carefully holding it together, I'm going to attach it to the back of the trees, just like that. And then I can kind of tweak it. I can kind of fiddle with it. So I'm going to make sure the end is tucked in there. Make sure this end is tucked in. And then you can kind of tweak it a little bit and check it from the other side and see how it looks. That looks good to me. And then what I'll do is I'll put a couple of dimensionals on, and I'll kind of overlap the twine a little bit too, so that for extra security there. There we go. Okay, so we're almost ready to do some assembly here. So the only other thing I'm going to do on here is I'm going to do a little bit of flickage. I'm going to bring back that piece of black cardstock that I used earlier, and I've got my black Stampin' Writer, stamping, what am I calling it? A stamping right marker. And again, with the brush tip end, I'm just going to use the lid. I'm going to use the brush tip inside the lid, and I'm just going to do some flicking and get some flickage. So if I hold it up, you hopefully can see I've got some little flicks there. All right, then I can attach this to, I'll put some adhesive on the other side, and I'll attach it to my soft succulent piece. You can use whatever glue you like here. It's a bit tricky. So I'll bring back my card, and that closes nicely. Now I do have that little tiny piece that's just poking out, so I'm going to just trim that. That's this little piece right here. I'm just going to take my snips, and I'm just going to trim that piece off, and no one will know. That way when I close it, we don't see it sticking out anymore. I don't think anyone would really even notice, but if that bothers you, you can just trim it off. All right, so let's put some adhesive on the back here. Now, this is a bit tricky. You could do this first if you like, before the inside, because it is a bit tricky attaching it, because it's kind of a lot of layers here. So you could definitely do this first. So that looks good. And then let's attach our tree. I'll put this kind of down here. This would be pretty in Evening Evergreen too, if you wanted to do all black. You could do whatever color you like. And then the sentiment strip, I'm going to attach like this, and I'm just going to put a dimensional on this end and not that one, because it's going to overlap the trees there. So I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of Stampin' Seal there. Take the back off my dimensional and put this, I think, kind of, you can have it all the way over, you can just have it partially overlapping, kind of wherever you like, whatever you like really. I'm just going to do it like this. Okay, and then of course no card would be complete, no Stampin' Up! Card would be complete without a little bit of bling. So I'm going to put a couple, I think right here. I tend to put three, I tend to usually just put 3 on, but if you like more, you can. And if you were doing this as a masculine card and you didn't want to add the bling, obviously you don't have to. You could just leave that off. And I'm going to put one right down here. And there we go. That's our card. So let me show you a couple of others that I did. Let's take one more look at this one. The front. Let me open it up, and it's just lovely. So pretty. What do you think? So let me show you a couple of others that I did. So I've got one it's exactly the same design. It's a slightly different color scheme. This is, you see I need to trim off that little, you see that little bit poking out? This is Pear Pizzazz and Old Olive, and inside, here's the inside. And I just did the different greens to match the greens in the designer series paper, because there was kind of a olivey, I don't know if you can see, maybe this way, there's kind of an olivey green or Pear Pizzazz or something down here. So I just did the greens to match. So there's that one. And then I did a slightly easier version for people that wanted a slightly quicker card to do. We didn't want to do the sponging. I did one that was just black and white. So on the front here, this is all black memento ink and a black tree with some silver. And I've embossed the sentiment. Oh, and this one had the gold. Don't know if you noticed, but this one had all gold. It had the gold twine and then gold embossing and then some gold embellishments too. So that looked pretty, I thought. But this one, I've used matte black dots here and a little bit of silver. And then on the inside, it's just a black cardstock. And so no sponging or stamping. And the nice thing about doing it in black is that you could use any of the backgrounds, any of the designer series paper that you liked from the New Horizons or from anything, come to think of it. You know, you can use any color you like. This one is really pretty kind of blues and pinks. So I think it looks really lovely with the black. And then I did heat emboss the sentiment here. For this one, obviously you'd need to write on the back because there's not a place to write inside. So if you wanted to add another sentiment or something on the back, you definitely could. They do fit in an envelope. They're a little bit, there's quite a few layers, so you might need some extra postage on here, but it will fit in an envelope. So anyway, there's our 3 cards. I hope you'll give these a try. And if you want to purchase any of the supplies, like I said, everything will be listed. And please do like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more from me. And thanks so much for watching. I will catch you next time. Bye for now.